Picture a city of 4 million people. Now imagine knowing it without ever seeing it. Not the spires, not the way the fog sits on the Thames at dawn, not the faces pushing past you on the pavement, not the colour of the omnibuses, not the painted gold letters above the shop fronts on Ludgate Hill. None of that. Just sound, just smell. Just the particular way the ground changes under the worn soles of your boots. The slick cobbles near the river. The smooth stone flags outside a church door. The sudden hollow echo when you step into a covered arcade. The way the noise closes around you like water when the crowd thickens, and how it opens again, briefly, like a door swinging wide when you find yourself crossing a square. That is London in the autumn of 1878. That is your London. And the first thing you need to understand about your London is this. You do not belong to it. Not officially. Not in any way the city would recognise. There is no address with your name on it. There is no employer who knows your face. There is no pew reserved for you at any church. No membership in any club or guild or benevolent association. The Metropolitan Police, who keep very careful notes about such things, have a category for you. Itinerant, vagrant, person of no fixed abode, which is to say, a problem, which is to say, a statistic, which is to say, someone the city has not quite figured out what to do with yet. You are 42 years old, you've been blind for 8 years, and right now, at this specific moment, at something before 5 in the morning, you are lying on a wooden shelf in the casual ward of St. Giles' workhouse, and the thing that woke you was the smell. Not one smell, never just one smell in this place. There is the man 2 shelves down who's not washed his feet since August, or possibly longer. There is the communal bucket in the corner, which was full by midnight and has only gotten worse since. There is the particular sweetness of rot from somewhere in the wall. Not food rot, not human rot. Something organic and slow and patient. Some fungus or mould that has been quietly eating the timber framing for years. There is the smell of damp wool from 30 bodies breathing in a space built for perhaps 20, and underneath all of it, the base note of the place itself, sweat and stone and the particular despair that soaks into walls over decades. You have been in enough of these places to know the smell is institutional. It is the smell of being processed rather than helped. The smell of charity issued like a ration. Welcome to London, 1878, the greatest city in the world, depending on who you ask and what you mean by great. The shelf under your back is 6 inches wide. You know this because you measured it with your hand on your first night here, 3 weeks ago, the same way you measure everything now. Your hand is your ruler, your nose is your map. The sounds in the dark tell you more than most people learn from a lifetime of looking. You're not asleep. You've not slept properly in 8 years, not since the accident, not since the thing your brain has not fully accepted happened, and you still wake sometimes reaching for a lamp that is not there, still catch yourself turning toward a window you cannot see. The darkness when you sleep and the darkness when you wake are the same darkness now. It took 2 years to stop being terrified by that. It took another year to stop being angry. What comes after the anger is something you do not have a word for. Not peace. Peace implies rest, more like a kind of grinding adaptation, the way a river eventually carves through stone, not because the river wants to, just because that is what water does. The man across from you starts coughing. It is the cough of someone who has spent too many nights in places like this, damp and cold and airless. It rattles loose and wet and goes on for too long. Nobody wakes up to help him. Nobody in a casual ward wakes up for anything short of a fire, and sometimes not even then. You sit up. Your back aches in the specific way it always aches now. Not the ache of hard work, but the ache of a body that has been cold too many times, that has slept on surfaces not designed for human sleeping, that's been hungry often enough that it has started to draw inward, to economize, to hoard whatever warmth it can find. Your boots are under the shelf. You laced them before you lay down last night because boots left out in the casual ward have a way of walking off on their own. This is one of the things you learned in the first weeks. There are rules to this life that nobody writes down. They exist in the knowing of people who've lived this life for years, and if you are lucky, someone explains them to you, and if you are not lucky, you learn them the expensive way. The boots are stiff with cold. Your fingers are stiff with cold. You work the laces through the eyelets slowly, feeling each loop, each crossing, making sure they are right. You cannot look down to check. You never check by looking anymore. Checking is done with your hands, with the tips of your fingers, which have become over 8 years extraordinarily sensitive. You can tell silk from cotton by touch now. You can tell cheap tallow candle from good wax by holding them close and smelling the wick. You can read the surface of a coin by running your thumb across it. Feel the milling on the edge, the relief of the image on the face. A farthing has a specific weight. A halfpenny is slightly bigger. A penny is heavier than most people realize when they are thinking about it properly. You've thought about coins very carefully. Coins are your income, your measure of a good day versus a bad one, your buffer against the workhouse, your freedom such as it is. You know them the way a jeweller knows gems. You stand up. The shelf is low enough that you have to be careful, but you have done this enough times to know where the beam above it sits. You duck without thinking. The body learns routes. The ward is already stirring. You can hear it. The rustle of blankets. Someone else pulling on boots. A quiet argument in the corner about something. The words too low to make out, but the tone unmistakable. In a room full of men with nothing, small things become large very quickly. Who took more than his share of floor space? Who coughed too much in the night? Who has a slightly better blanket? You find your coat on the peg where you left it. Your hand goes straight to it. No searching, because you counted the pegs last night. 12 from the door, and you are at 12. You always count. You count everything. The number of steps from the ward door to the yard, the number of stairs down from the first floor, the number of paces from the workhouse gate to the corner of Endell Street. The world, for you, is a series of measurements, a web of distances and directions and textures and sounds. And if you pay enough attention to it, it becomes a map. Not a perfect map, not a map that tells you everything, but a map that keeps you alive. Your coat is heavy wool, once dark blue, now the colour of something that has been rained on enough times that it has arrived at its final grey. You bought it for 4pence from a rag shop near Drury Lane 18 months ago, which was a good price, because the man who sold it to you did not know that the buttons were bone, and not merely horn and bone buttons are worth something. You kept that piece of knowledge to yourself. The buttons are your emergency fund. They are the last thing you would sell before the last resort. You do not want to think about the last resort. The man with the cough is still coughing. You reach out as you pass and find his shoulder in the dark and give it a brief pressure. Not much, just to say, I hear you. You're here. This is not nothing. He does not say anything. The cough pauses for a moment, then continues. You walk toward the door. The casual ward operates on a schedule. You came in at 6 in the evening, the gate opens again at 6 in the morning, and in between you sleep on your shelf, and in the morning you do your task, and then you are out. The task is stone breaking. 100 weight of stone per man. You cannot break stone. You cannot see the stone. You explained this to the admissions clerk when you arrived, and he stared at you for a moment with an expression you could not see, but could read from the shift of his breathing and the slight pause before he spoke, which was the expression of a man who has encountered an administrative problem he was not specifically trained for. The rule is everyone works. The alternative to stone breaking, for those unable to do it, is oakum picking. You know oakum picking. It is the unravelling of old rope, pulling the fibres apart with your fingers until your hands bleed, and the piles of oakum around you have the particular dusty, tarry smell of old ships. It is miserable work. It is also work you can do in the dark, which is the only advantage it has. Your fingers are better at it than most because your fingers are better at everything they can reach. You have become, out of necessity, more dexterous than you were when you could see. By the time the ward door opens, you are near the front, not pushing. You learned early not to push in these places. Pushing gets you noticed. Getting noticed in a casual ward is almost never good. You wait your position near the door, listening to the man beside you breathe, listening to the general sounds of the space, and when the door opens and the cold hits you in the face like a damp cloth, you step out and down and keep your pace steady and your chin up and your stick low and sweeping. The stick, 18 inches of smooth ash, rounded at the tip with a slight curve in the handle that fits your palm. You found it in a ditch outside Hammersmith 3 years ago, which is a long story. The point is you found it and you kept it, and it is the most important object you own. More important than the coat, more important than the boots. The stick is your eyes. The stick tells you where the pavement ends and the gutter begins, where there is a step you did not know about, where someone has left a cart or a barrel or a pile of horse manure directly in your path, which happens with remarkable regularity in London, which is a city that seems to have no strong feelings about where its horse manure ends up. You have walked into horse manure more times than you care to count. The morning air is cold. October cold, the kind that comes with a dampness in it. Not the dry bite of December, but something softer and greyer. The kind of cold that does not announce itself, but just settles in and refuses to leave. You can smell the coal smoke already. It is always there in London. Always that particular sweetness and acid of 1,000,000 fires. But in the morning it is thicker, more immediate, the overnight residue of it sitting on everything before the day's activity pushes it into motion. You turn left out of the workhouse gate. Left, 22 paces to the corner of Endell Street. Right at the corner, the sound of the street opening up. The smell of a bakery somewhere ahead. Bread and yeast and the deep caramel smell of something burning just slightly at the crust. You do not stop. The bakery is not for you. The bakery is warmth and light and transaction, a world that requires a coin in your hand before it opens its door, and you have not yet earned today's coins. Today has to happen first. Today is the pitch. Endell Street to St Giles High Street, bearing east, keeping the traffic sound on your right. In the morning, this early, the traffic is mostly carts. The particular heavy rumble and clatter of a brewer's dray. The horse's hooves larger and heavier than the quick click of a hansom's pair. The milk float lighter, with that liquid sound from within. The sloshing of the cans. The sound of metal on cobblestone, the sound of leather. the sound of men calling to each other across the pre-dawn street, voices that carry differently in cold air than in warm, cleaner somehow, less absorbed, each word arriving with a little more edge on it. You navigate by sound the way other people navigate by sight. The brewer's dray is going east, which confirms your direction. The milk float overtakes it. The horse's shoes a faster rhythm. The bakery smell fades behind you and is replaced by something sour and animal, the smell of a stable yard to your left, and you know exactly where you are because you've counted this route enough times to know that the stable yard is 53 paces from the corner of Endell Street, which means you are on schedule. 53 paces. 40 more to the next landmark, which is a narrow alley that you will not go down, because the alley is where 3 men robbed you in your second month in London, taking 4 shillings and 2 pence and the better of your 2 coats, the one with the extra lining. You know the alley by the particular echo, the way the street sound changes when you pass it, a brief hollow acoustics. You keep to the right side of the pavement when you pass it now. You have not been in the alley since. There are things in this city that want to hurt you. This is true for everyone in London. But for you it is true in a more immediate, more pressing way, because the things that want to hurt you know that you cannot see them coming. There are men in London who specialise in robbing the blind. This is not metaphor. This is a specific practical fact. They call themselves nothing. They do not think of themselves as a type. But they exist, the way every kind of predator exists in a city large enough to sustain them, and they know the same things you know, that you navigate by routine, that you follow the same routes, that the element of surprise runs almost entirely in their favour. You've learned to compensate. You vary your routes occasionally, though not too much, because too much variation, and you lose your map. You pay attention to footsteps behind you, to the particular sound of someone shortening their pace to match yours, which is different from the ordinary sound of the street. You carry nothing worth stealing in your pockets. The coins go into a small canvas pouch tied inside your shirt against your skin, and the pouch has been there long enough that it has begun to smell like you, which is useful, because it means it smells like everything else and does not stand out. You're thinking about all of this as you walk. You're always thinking about all of this. The cognitive load of moving through London blind is something nobody prepares you for. It does not get smaller with practice. It just becomes familiar. You stop being afraid of it and start managing it. There is a kind of efficiency in it, eventually. A terrible efficiency. The street is getting busier. You can feel it before you can properly hear it. Or rather, the hearing is the feeling now. The sound of the city thickening around you. More footsteps, more wheels, more voices. The particular acoustic crowding of a busy street. This is London waking up. It happens faster than you might expect. One moment the streets are thin with carts and early workers, and then very quickly they fill as if someone somewhere has opened a tap. Bess finds you at the corner of Great Russell Street. She always finds you here. You are not sure how. She's not your dog, technically, in the sense that you did not buy her, do not own her in any legal sense. She was a stray when she first came to you 18 months ago, near the church at St. Giles, pressing her small warm flank against your leg in the way dogs have of announcing themselves, and you had fed her the heel of bread you'd been saving for later, and she had stayed. Dogs have their own logic. Bess's logic has never been fully explained to you. But here she is, her cold nose bumping against your hand, her tail moving against your leg with that particular rhythm that means she is pleased. She is a terrier of some kind, mostly. You've never seen her and have built your picture of her from what you've touched and what other people have told you, sometimes kindly and sometimes not. Smallish, wire-haired, white with brown patches around the face, someone told you once. Quick eyes, the kind of dog that was bred for tunnels and darkness and following things by nose. You reach down and she pushes up into your hand, warm and alive and unreasonably cheerful for this hour of the morning. Morning, you say, not loudly, just to her. You talk to her more than you talk to most people. She does not judge the quality of your diction. She does not flinch from the sight of your eyes. She does not do the thing that people do, the sudden, slight stillness when they realize you are blind, the recalibration you can feel in the air before they decide what tone of voice to use with you, whether you are an object of pity or an object of minor administrative concern or simply something to be stepped around. Bess does not recalibrate. Bess is exactly herself at every moment, which is something you have come to value more than you can properly explain. She falls into step beside you, not leading. You do not need leading on this route. She walks alongside, and you are aware of her warmth on your left side, and occasionally her nose bumps your hand again, which you interpret as a kind of commentary on the morning. Here is a smell. Here is something interesting. Here is the world, and it is full of things. The pitch is on Ludgate Hill near the bottom, where the street begins its rise toward the cathedral. You've been using this pitch for almost a year. Before this you had a pitch near Liverpool Street Station, which was better in terms of volume, more people, more pennies, but which was contested, which is to say that 3 other regular beggars considered it their territory, and one of them had expressed this opinion in a physical way that left you with a bruised rib and a new appreciation for the geography of disputes. The Ludgate Hill pitch is quieter but safer. The men who pass there are mostly city workers, clerks and junior partners, and the occasional solicitor making his way up from Blackfriars. They are not generous, but they are consistent, and they are for the most part polite, which in this life is worth more than people who have not lived this life might realise. There is a wall at the pitch, low, maybe 3 feet high, part of the boundary of a churchyard that sits back from the street. You found it by accident walking this section for the first time, your stick finding the edge of it, and you sat on it and discovered it was the perfect height for sitting in a way that suggested stability without suggesting leisure. The sit of a man who is present, not transient. The sit of someone with, if not exactly a place, then at least a spot. This distinction matters more than you can explain. The Metropolitan Police operate under the Vagrancy Act of 1824, which makes it an offence to beg in a public place, but the enforcement is, shall we say, selective. The policemen on the Ludgate Hill beat have been there long enough to have developed their own informal taxonomy of the street people they encounter, beggars who are known, who have been in the same spot long enough to be familiar, who do not harass passers-by, who maintain a certain decorum, who have the good sense to acknowledge the constable when he passes, and not to make his morning any more complicated than it already is. These beggars are managed rather than prosecuted. They are part of the street's furniture, in the way that a permanent puddle in a particular spot becomes part of the street's furniture. Nobody likes it. Nobody moves it. You work around it. You are, by now, furniture. This took time. This cost something. The first months on this pitch, you could feel the constable's attention every time he passed. The slight slowing of his footsteps, the pause. You were new. New things need to be assessed. You made yourself easy to assess. You sat quietly. You spoke to no one who had not spoken to you first. When the constable passed, you said, "Good morning, officer," in a voice that was polite without being ingratiating, that acknowledged his authority without appealing to it, that communicated a person aware of the delicacy of their situation. It took 6 weeks before his footsteps stopped slowing when they passed you. It took another month before he said good morning back. That good morning was a kind of citizenship, the only kind available to you. You settle onto the wall. The stone is cold through your coat and through your trousers and through everything. The cold of stone that has absorbed a night's chill and is in no hurry to let it go. Bess sits between your feet. You reach into your coat and check the matches. The matches. This is important. Because you are not technically begging. That is to say, you do not technically hold out your hand and ask for money. You sell matches. This is the distinction that keeps you on the legal side of the Vagrancy Act, or at least near enough to the legal side that the constable can pretend he believes it. You have a small wooden tray that hangs from a cord around your neck, and on the tray you have matches, small bundles of 4 wrapped in blue paper, sold for a halfpenny a bundle. You buy them wholesale near Bermondsey, 12 bundles for 5 pence, and sell them at a halfpenny each, which is a profit of 7 pence per 12 bundles if every bundle sells, which they never quite do, but which is the theoretical maximum of your day's earnings from matches alone. Most of your income does not come from matches. Most of your income comes from the goodwill of strangers who press a coin into your hand whether they take a bundle of matches or not, who give you the penny and wave off the change with the particular gesture of people who want to help but do not want to stop long enough for help to become a conversation. You know this gesture, by the way. The hand withdraws quickly after the coin is placed, by the direction of footsteps immediately after, always continuing forward, never pausing. The transaction is the charity. The matches are the mechanism that allows both parties to pretend it is commerce. The first hour is thin. This is always the way of it. Before 7, before the city workers start their march up the hill, the street is mostly carts and the odd workman hurrying somewhere, and workmen do not buy matches from street vendors. Workmen are themselves in the precarious position of being 1 week's wages from the kind of life you are living, and the sight of someone living that life does not inspire generosity in the way it might in someone secure enough to afford the comfort of sympathy. Sympathy is, in some respects, a luxury. The workmen look straight ahead. Sometimes their boots pass very close to where you're sitting, close enough that you can feel the air of their passing, and they do not slow. This is not cruelty. You stopped calling it cruelty after the first year. It is economics. They cannot afford to stop. But between 7 and 9:30 the city men come. You hear them before you can distinguish individuals. The particular sound of leather soles on paving stone, different from the heavy clump of working boots, lighter, quicker, a more purposeful sound. The sound of men going to indoor work, to desks and ledgers and the warm interior of offices. They come from the direction of the river, from the new embankment and from Blackfriars Bridge, and they flow up Ludgate Hill toward the banking houses and insurance offices of the city. There are hundreds of them, and they move like water, filling the pavement, their voices overlapping the smell of them, a collective smell of hair oil and wool and tobacco, the particular morning smell of men who have breakfasted and been shaved and put on clean collars, and are now executing the second act of their morning routine. You do not call out. You learned this in the early months, tried the calling out, the announcement of your presence and your wares, and found it produced the wrong effect. Too much for this stretch of street. The city workers have a particular relationship with the street poor. They are aware of you the way they are aware of the weather. It is a condition they navigate, not an encounter they choose. Calling out makes them have to actively not respond, which they find irritating. Sitting quietly makes them feel they have the choice to stop, which some of them exercise. The art of this pitch is stillness. You sit. You hold the tray. You do not look toward them, which is easy for you, because you cannot look toward anything. Your face is simply forward, which is neutral, which reads as dignity rather than solicitation. Bess sits between your feet, and is also still, which is one of her gifts, this ability to be still on command. You taught her this in the first weeks, the way you learned everything about this life, by trial and error, and the constant adjustment that comes from having nothing else to do but pay attention. The first coin of the day lands in the small dish on the tray. You do not know the man. You hear him slow, feel the slight draft of someone stopping near you, and then the sound of a coin leaving a pocket and entering the dish. A small ring of metal on metal, and then footsteps continuing. You do not count it immediately. Counting draws attention to the counting, and attention to coins draws other attention. You wait. Another minute passes. The street thickens, more footsteps, another coin. This one has a different sound, heavier landing, which suggests a penny rather than a halfpenny. Good morning. More footsteps. The smell of hair oil and wet wool. Another coin, and another, and one man who picks up a bundle of matches and holds them for a moment before putting them back and putting 2p in the dish anyway, which is more than a bundle costs but less than it would have cost him to feel bad about it later, which is a calculation most people make quickly without knowing they are making it. By 8 o'clock the dish has 4p halfpenny in it. By 8:30, 7p 3 farthings. The morning is a good morning. The air is cold enough to make people feel generous, or rather, cold enough to make the warmth of a good action feel warmer. This is something you have noticed. On very cold mornings people give more than on mild ones, not out of sympathy for your cold, though that may be part of it, but because the cold makes goodness feel more vivid. The coin that drops into a dish on a cold morning is different from the same coin dropped on a mild one. The giver feels more. A woman stops. You know she's a woman from the sound of her shoes, the lighter step, and from the way the air moves before she speaks. A smaller disruption than a man. She does not speak immediately. She stands there for a moment and you wait, and Bess shifts slightly between your feet. You've a dog, she says, not a question. I have, you say. She keeps me company. What's her name? Bess. A pause. You hear her crouch down, which costs her something in her dress and her dignity on a public street, but she crouches anyway. And you hear her speaking softly to the dog in the way that some people speak to dogs. A different register entirely. Softer, without the awareness of being heard that comes into adult conversation. Bess's tail goes against your ankle in the thud, thud, thud of a dog being petted by a kind stranger. She's sweet, the woman says, straightening. She is, you agree. Another pause. Then a coin, placed carefully in the dish rather than dropped. The care of placement is different from the drop. The placement means something. She's still there when she does it, still present, not already walking away. You hear her breathe. How long have you been on this pitch? She asks. Nearly a year, you say. It must be cold in the mornings. Mornings, yes, you say. Afternoons are better. She laughs. It is a short laugh, surprised out of her, Not the laugh of charity, but the laugh of amusement. A real response. The rarest thing on this stretch of street in this kind of encounter. "I'll come back this way," she says. "I usually do." Her footsteps move on, quick and definite. A woman with somewhere to be and probably not much time to be there. You do not know who she is. You will probably hear her footsteps again some morning and know them, the way you know the footsteps of many regulars, their particular rhythm and pace, and something in you will register, the woman who laughed. But you will not know her name or her face, or any of the details that people usually use to know one another. This is the social reality of your life. You know people by their voices and their footsteps and the way they approach you, and what you do not know is everything else. Everything visual. All the information that the sighted world files away automatically without effort, without even really choosing to. The age in a face, the quality of clothing, the expression that says I am about to give versus the expression that says I'm about to pass without stopping. You have developed compensatory skills. You can read a lot from a voice. Confidence or anxiety. Wealth or poverty. Education or the lack of it. The particular hesitation of someone who has thought about stopping before they stop, versus the impulse stopper who is beside you before they have decided to be. But you are working from a partial picture. You are always working from a partial picture. This is the cognitive exhaustion of blindness that people do not talk about. It is not the darkness you have made peace with. It is the permanent incompleteness of every social encounter, the sense of moving through a world that is fully present to everyone else and partially present to you, and the constant work of filling in the gaps from what you have. By 10 o'clock you have 1 shilling and 4pence, and you've sold 6 bundles of matches and given away 1 bundle to a boy who pressed the wrong amount into your hand and ran before you could correct the transaction, which irritated you for a moment, and then ceased to irritate you when you thought about the small size of the hand and the fact that the running suggested someone who would not have been a convincing candidate for your case, even if you could have made it. The city flow is thinning. The surge between 7 and 9 is the main event. After that, the pickings are thinner, more sporadic. The occasional tradesman, the women doing their shopping, the clerk sent on errands. The real afternoon business will come around 1 o'clock when the same men return from their lunches, their pockets slightly lighter from the meal and their tempers slightly easier from the warmth of it. And some of them will stop and some of them will give slightly more than they might have given in the cold morning. But first there is the morning to fill, and the morning for you is not only the pitch. On the morning you do not need to leave the pitch, which today is not because the match supply is getting low. You sometimes sit very still and listen. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the more demanding things you do, sitting still and listening to London, because London demands so much of you simply to survive that the act of choosing to receive rather than to act, to be the instrument rather than the agent, is harder than it should be. But when you manage it, what you hear is extraordinary. The city has layers of sound the way it has layers of smell, and from the pitch on Ludgate Hill you're in a particularly rich acoustic location. Above everything, above the traffic and the voices and the street vendors, you can hear the bells of St. Paul's. Not the cathedral itself, not this early, but the smaller bells of the surrounding churches, St. Martin's Ludgate and St. Bride's just down the hill, each with their own voice, their own rhythm, the way the sound bounces off the dome of the cathedral and comes back slightly changed, slightly richer, as if the cathedral is adding something. When you were a child in Birmingham, your father took you to hear the bells of St. Philip's on a Sunday morning, and the memory of it is still there, intact and vivid in a way that most visual memories have faded, because sound memories, you have found, persist differently. You remember the quality of light that morning only vaguely, a grey autumn morning, your father's coat dark against it, but you remember the bells, the particular chord they struck, the way the sound spread over the city like water. You have better bells now. You have the best bells in England, but you cannot see the dome they hang in. You have touched it once. Somebody took you in, a curate at a church near Blackfriars, a young man with a reforming streak who had read about education for the blind and had taken it upon himself to personally represent the principle. He took you into the cathedral. He described things as you walked. The floor is black and white marble, he said, in a pattern like a chessboard, but bigger than any chessboard you have ever imagined. And the nave is enormous, and the dome begins above the transept crossing and goes up, he said, further up than you would believe possible. He put your hand on one of the great pillars and you felt the stone, cold and finely finished, the slight grain of it, and you pressed your palm flat against it and tried to feel the cathedral through the stone. You cannot see it, but you know it is there. You know it the way you know a great many things now, not by looking, but by the accumulated evidence of sound and texture and the testimony of others. It is a different kind of knowing. Whether it is lesser or merely different, you have stopped trying to decide. After about an hour on the pitch in the mid-morning lull, you eat. Eating happens from a paper parcel that you have carried since leaving the workhouse, which contains a piece of bread and a scrap of hard cheese, bought last night for 3 farthings from a stall near Endell Street. The bread is coarse and the cheese is very hard, the kind of hard that comes from being left out too long, and together they are not what anyone would call a good breakfast, but they are more than nothing, and you eat them methodically, breaking the bread into pieces, working the cheese with your back teeth, giving the smaller pieces of bread to Bess, who receives them with dignity and without scrambling, which is one of the things you love about her. You drink nothing with breakfast because there is nothing to drink. There will be water at midday from the pump in a court off the New Bridge Street, if you get there in time, before the queue is too long, which you usually manage. The queue is mostly women and children in the morning, and you've learned to go in the late morning when it thins. Water in London in 1878 is still, in many parts of the city, a project under construction. The new water mains are going in, the new sewers are working. They have cleared most of what the cholera left behind, but the clearing is slow and the clearance is incomplete, and in the parts of the city where you live, where you move, the infrastructure of clean water and proper drainage is still more aspiration than fact. The pump at New Bridge Street is reliable most days. Some days it is not. On the days it is not, you drink from a standpipe near Blackfriars if someone has left the tap partially open, or from the trough outside the coaching house on Carter Lane, which technically exists for horses but which nobody polices. You've been sick 3 times from bad water in 8 years. This is, by the standards of your immediate community, a good record. Around 11, a boy stops near you. You know he is a boy from the footsteps, lighter and less decisive than a man's, and from the fact that he has been circling for several minutes, which is what bored children do, orbiting points of interest in a pattern that has no direction. He's been behind you, and then to the side, and now he is in front of you, and you can hear him staring. The particular silence of a child staring at something they find unusual. "Have you got no eyes?" he says. Straight to it. No preliminary. "I have eyes," you say. "They don't work." A pause. The rustle of clothing as he shifts his weight. What happened to them? Lime, you say. This is the shortest version of the truth. The longer version is this. 8 years ago, you worked in a lime kiln outside Birmingham, and the work of tending a lime kiln involves the handling of quicklime, which is calcium oxide, which is an extraordinarily caustic material which burns through organic matter with a patience and completeness that suggests, in the kiln worker's nightmare, a personal malice. You were careful. You'd been careful for 3 years. And then on one particular Tuesday morning in October you were not careful enough, or something shifted that should not have shifted, or you were tired in a way that made your hands slightly less sure than they should have been, and the result was a face full of lime dust and a morning in agony and a week in hospital and the slow, terrible revelation that the agony was not going to produce its opposite, that you were going to live, but that the seeing was not going to come back. The lime burns through the cornea first, then whatever it reaches next. You did not know this when it happened. You learned it afterwards from a doctor who explained it with the particular professional detachment of a man who has delivered this news before and has found that clarity, however brutal, is more humane than softening. You tell none of this to the boy. You tell him, lime. One word. Let him make of it what he will. Does it hurt? Not any more. Another pause. Bess has turned her head toward the boy, and you can feel her attention in the slight shift of her weight against your leg. Can she see? He asks. Better than both of us put together, you say. He laughs. It is the laugh of a child caught off guard, bright and quick, the sound of someone who came expecting something strange and found something else instead. You hear him crouch toward Bess and feel her tail begin again. What's her name? Bess. Hello, Bess. The small voice has gone soft. Hello, girl. You let him pet the dog for a minute. This is part of the calculation you never articulate but always make. The calculation of the pitch, the way that small human moments, a child talking to a dog, a woman laughing at an unexpected moment, a man slowing down because something about your stillness, read as worthwhile stopping for, contribute, not always directly but always eventually, to the accumulation of goodwill that is your actual business. You do not sell matches. You sell the slight improvement in a person's morning that comes from a brief encounter with something real, something outside the flow of commerce and hurry. You are, in a way, an interruption in the day's momentum, and for the person who needs an interruption, even the smallest one, you are worth a penny or two. The boy eventually moves on. His footsteps have the direction of someone going somewhere after all, somewhere he perhaps should have been before he stopped. No coin. But that is not what the moment was for. The late morning passes. The sun, if there is sun, which today there is not. You can tell from the quality of the cold, which is even and shadowless and cloud-filtered, reaches its highest point and begins its descent. The sounds of the street shift. The delivery wagons are fewer. The foot traffic changes character, becomes more mixed. Women with baskets, men returning from morning errands. The particular pace of a city that has finished its first effort and is regrouping for the second. At noon, or close enough to noon that the church bells confirm it from 3 different directions at slightly different moments, none of them precisely synchronized, which is a small comedy of London that you appreciate. You pack up the tray and stand. Bess knows this movement. She's on her feet before you're fully upright. The water pump first, then the match resupply. The water pump is in a court you could find in your sleep, which you have, nearly, at least in the sense that you have navigated there in states of exhaustion that must approximate sleep. 17 paces from the pitch along the wall, left at the corner, down the slight slope of a narrow court, feeling the gradient through your feet, the cobbles getting more uneven as you go deeper into the court. The pump is at the end. You can hear it before you reach it. The faint creak of the handle if someone is using it. The dripping from the spout that continues after use. The particular hollow sound when there is no water in the pipe, which is a sound you know and dread. Today there is water. You hear the dripping as you approach and speed your step slightly. 2 women at the pump. You hear them talking, a flowing conversation that does not pause when you arrive, which is the social signal that you are known here, that you're not a stranger to be observed and evaluated. One of them, whose voice you know as Annie, the woman who sleeps under the covered entrance of the tallow chandler 2 streets over, says, "Morning, then," in a tone that acknowledges you without making a production of it. "Morning," you say, and step up to wait. She finishes and steps aside, and you move in and take the handle and pump. The water is cold enough to hurt your hands, but you drink from your cupped palm. 3 palmfuls, tasting the iron of the pipe and the faint mineral tang of the Thames water that everything eventually resolves to in this part of London. You hold your hands under the stream and let the cold close around them, and then take the last little water and bring it to your face, the cold hitting your forehead and cheeks like a mild alarm, the daily ritual that passes for refreshment. Bess drinks from the puddle beside the pump. You hear her lapping and wait. One of the women says something to the other that you do not fully catch, something about a husband, and the other says something short that closes the subject. The kind of exchange that requires no response from you and gets none. You are part of the court's social world in the way that the pump itself is part of it. Something present, something with a function, not precisely intimate. You refill the small bottle you carry in your inside pocket. Flat, glass, stoppered with a cork that fits tightly enough not to leak. You got it from the dustbin of a house in Clerkenwell 6 months ago, which was good fortune because glass bottles are useful, and this is the perfect size for your needs, and you are aware, as with the matches and the boots and the coat, that losing it would represent a material problem. Then the match resupply. The match seller you use is near Bermondsey, which is a journey. 40 minutes on foot, longer on bad days when the streets are thicker with mud, and the way is obstructed by the various urban unpredictabilities that you must navigate around. It is a journey you make twice a week, and the route is one of the more complex in your internal map because it involves the river crossing, which involves the bridge. The bridge is London Bridge. London Bridge in 1878 is not the medieval bridge of an earlier century, crammed with houses and shops. The one that stood for so long it seemed like a natural feature of the landscape rather than a human construction. That bridge was demolished nearly 50 years ago. The current bridge, the one your boots will touch in 45 minutes, is a newer thing, cleaner. 5 stone arches replacing the 19 medieval ones, opened in 1831 and therefore old enough to feel established, but not old enough to feel ancient. It is wider than the old bridge, wide enough to carry the enormous volume of traffic that must cross the Thames at this point every day. You know the bridge the way you know everything, by touch and sound and the information of your feet. The approach from the North Bank has a particular acoustic. The city noise changes as you come down King William Street, the sounds channeling down toward the river, and then you feel the slight exposure of the bridge itself. The openness that is the openness of water on both sides, even though you cannot see the water. The wind is different on the bridge. The air is different, colder, carrying the river's particular smell. The Thames in October smelling of estuary and low tide, and the particular organic richness of a river that has absorbed the city's industry for centuries, and is still, despite everything the engineers have done, still carrying all of it, all of the city's liquid business to the sea. The noise of the bridge is constant and substantial. The carts and wagons and omnibuses and horses, the sheer volume of traffic that must cross this single span, creating a rolling noise that is almost physical in its intensity, a vibration you can feel in the soles of your feet as well as hear, the whole bridge trembling very slightly under its own busyness. You keep to the pedestrian side, close to the parapet, your stick finding the edge of it, your left hand occasionally finding the stone of the parapet itself, cool and slightly gritty, the stone worn smooth by the touching of generations of people making this same crossing. You have touched stones that were touched by people who are long dead. This thought used to comfort you. Now it is simply a fact. Halfway across, Bess stops. She does this sometimes on the bridge, sits abruptly on her hindquarters and refuses to move, and you stand with her and listen and smell and try to understand what she knows that you do not. The river moves beneath you. The cold comes off the water in waves, a colder cold than the air above, a cold that smells of depth. The traffic noise is enormous. A boat horn somewhere downstream, low and mournful. The sound of men calling to each other on the wharves below, voices that carry up from the water level with a clarity that suggests the acoustic properties of the bridge arch, the curved stone throwing sound upward. Bess remains seated. You wait. This is the protocol. When Bess sits suddenly on the bridge, you wait. In 17 months she's been right every time. What she's right about in these cases varies. Once it was a man coming up fast behind you who she turned to face with a small sound that was not quite a growl, and who, when you turned to face him as well, your stick in your hand in a position that was not quite aggressive, but was not exactly non-aggressive either, changed course. Once it was a horse loose from its shaft who came through the crowd at a dangerous speed and passed within 2 feet of where you stood still. Once it was nothing you could identify. But Bess sat, and you stood, and then she stood again, and you continued, and whatever it was never happened. This time she sits for perhaps 30 seconds, and then stands on her own initiative and moves forward again, and you follow, and nothing happens, and the bridge ends under your feet and becomes the south bank, which smells different from the north. The south bank of the Thames in 1878 is still the south bank, which is to say, it is the part of London that London has historically used for the things it does not want to look at. The theatres were here before they moved. The prisons are still here, more of them than you would expect for such a relatively small area. The tanning yards are here, the leather dressing operations, the tripe dressers, the glue makers, all the industries that require large quantities of noxious substances and therefore require a degree of separation from the people who prefer not to smell them. The South Bank smells of these things in layers, tannin and animal fat and the acrid bite of chemicals you do not know the name of, and underneath all of it the river, always the river. You like the South Bank in spite of this, or perhaps because of it. It is rawer than the North, less polished, less performing. The people who live and work here have a directness you find easier to navigate than the more complicated social performances of the city side. They are not better people, necessarily. They are, in your experience, simply more immediately themselves. The match wholesaler is a man named Crab, whose warehouse is in a yard off the main road, past the turning, you know, by the smell of the tannery. Crab sells to 17 or 18 street vendors that you know of, possibly more. He is not kind. He is not unkind. He is a man in business who has calibrated his prices to the exact point where his customers have no better option but are not quite desperate enough to stop buying from him. This is a business philosophy and not a human one, and you have accepted it as such. You negotiate with Crab from the position of a regular customer who has established a baseline of trust over a year of transactions without default or dispute, which is worth something in this market, which means you pay 4.5 pence per 12 bundles rather than 5, which over the course of a week represents a meaningful saving. This is your economic reality. A halfpenny difference per 12 bundles, multiplied by 3 resupply trips per week, is 1.5 pence per week, is 6 pence per month, is something on the order of 6 shillings per year, which is more than a week's subsistence at the level you're subsisting at, which means it matters. You count out the coins for Crab by feel. He does not try to miscount your change, or has not in 11 months of transactions. You would know if he did, because the coins tell you, because you have learned to be faster than the hand that might shortchange you, your fingers already totaling the returned coins before the exchange is complete. He says nothing while you count. He knows you are counting, and he waits for it. This is, in its way, a form of respect, or at least recognition of competence. You wrap the new match bundles in the oilcloth you carry for the purpose, tuck them into the inside pocket and are back on the street. The return journey across the bridge is easier than the outward one because the wind has shifted slightly, and the bridge which had been in your face is now at your back. You can tell the wind direction from the sound of it, the way it moves against your coat, the slight cooling it produces on one cheek versus the other. Navigation by wind is unreliable in a city because the buildings channel and redirect it in ways that have nothing to do with the real directions of the compass. But across the Thames, in the middle of the river, the wind is more honest, and today it is coming from the northwest, which is cold and clean, and carries, faintly, the smell of something burning in the direction of Battersea. Bess trots beside you without the pause this time. The afternoon pitch is different from the morning one, not in location. You return to the same stretch of wall, the same cold stone, but the quality of the afternoon light, the quality you infer from the sounds of the street, the changes in the voices passing, the different acoustic character of the afternoon traffic, is different from the morning. And the people who pass are different, or the same people in different moods, the lunch accomplished, the afternoon ahead, the particular mix of energy and lethargy that mid-afternoon produces. You do better on the afternoon pitch than you might expect. There is a pattern that holds most days. A moderate morning, a quiet late morning, a slow start to the afternoon, and then around 2 o'clock, sometimes running until 3:30 or 4, a second wave of generosity. The city men returning from lunch, yes, but also, on this stretch, the women coming out of the drapers on the other side of the road, the particular shopper's generosity of someone who has just spent money on herself and is briefly in the register of spending, still in the warm current of commerce, still with her hand loosened from its usual grip. You know the draper's by the sound of the door. It has a particular bell, higher and sharper than the baker's bell down the road, a 2-note ring when it opens and a single note when it closes. You have catalogued the bells of shops on this stretch of street the way a bird watcher catalogues birds, by sound, by frequency, by what the sound announces about the creature's identity and state. The afternoon delivers 1 shilling and 1 penny, plus 2 bundles of matches sold, which with the morning's takings brings today to 2 shillings and 4pence halfpenny. 2 shillings and 4pence halfpenny is a good day. Your expenses for the day: the bread and cheese this morning 3 farthings, the match supply 4pence halfpenny, the water, which is free, the workhouse last night, which you paid for in oakum picking, which cost you nothing in coin but something in the skin of your fingertips, which are still slightly raw at the pads. Remaining approximately 1 shilling and 11pence 3 farthings. From 1 shilling and 11pence 3 farthings you must pay for tonight's shelter, which is the primary expense of this life. The cost of not sleeping in a doorway, which is both an economic cost and a survival cost, because sleeping in doorways in October in London will kill you if you do it enough times, the cold coming for you in increments, each cold night taking something you cannot fully replace. There are various options for shelter. The workhouse, which is cheapest and worst. You've described the workhouse already. A common lodging house, which runs from 3pence for the worst floor-level dormitory beds, to 4pence for a proper bed in a shared room, to 6pence for a slightly better shared room. 3pence buys you proximity to people who are a stage below you in this hierarchy, people whose desperation has moved past the point of managing toward the point of not managing, and proximity to them is a particular hazard. 4pence buys you something better. The 4penny lodging house you prefer is in a court off Blackfriars Road. You know the woman who runs it, a Mrs. Henshaw, who is 50 or 60 or possibly older, with a voice like a file on iron, and opinions about the character of her residents that are delivered without invitation but are not, you have found, without accuracy. She keeps a clean house by the standards of this type of establishment, which means the blankets are lousy but only slightly lousy, the mattresses are damp but only slightly damp, the other residents are questionable but not frightening, and the door has a lock that works, which is the thing that matters most. Mrs. Henshaw knows you. This is important. Mrs. Henshaw has been told about you by 2 of your regular contacts, the kind of informal reference that works in a lodging house, because in a lodging house, as in most things at this end of the social spectrum, reputation is everything. You pay on time. You do not cause trouble. You do not bring things into the house that should not be there. You're not drunk in the morning, which is the standard that separates the barely managing from the not managing in this world. The morning drunk being the thing most lodging housekeepers find most difficult to excuse. You're not drunk in the mornings. You're rarely drunk at any time. You cannot afford it in terms of coins, and you cannot afford it in terms of function. Being blind is a condition that punishes intoxication more severely than it punishes sobriety. The margin between your level of functioning and the level of not functioning at all is narrow enough that you cannot add the cognitive impairment of drink to the existing cognitive impairment of no sight without the arithmetic becoming very unfavourable very quickly. You've had this conversation with yourself many times. You reach the 4penny lodging house at 5:30. You have been on your feet since before 5 in the morning, which is more than 12 hours, and your legs know this, and your back knows this, and your hands know it most of all. This stick has been in your hand all day, and your grip on it is both firmer and more automatic than it was this morning, the muscle having settled into the shape of holding it, the way a carpenter's hand settles into the grip of a hammer. Mrs. Henshaw's at the door, as she usually is at this hour, with a pipe that she keeps lit through methods you have not investigated. Her voice comes at you from a height that suggests she's standing on the step. "You're back early," she says. "Good day," you say. "Dog? With me?" She makes a sound that is not quite approval, but is not the sound of someone who's going to make the dog an issue. Bess has been coming to Mrs. Henshaw's lodging house for 4 months. The arrangement is not formally acknowledged. Bess sleeps on your feet and is invisible in the morning, which is the protocol. You pay your 4p. You follow the sound of Mrs. Henshaw's footsteps up the narrow stairs, your free hand finding the banister rail, the wood worn smooth and slightly sticky with the collective touch of everyone who has used these stairs. The handrail is loose. It has been loose for the 4 months you've been coming here. Mrs. Henshaw has been intending to fix it for the 4 months you've been coming here. Your room is the 4th on the left. You know this by counting doors and by the sound, a different acoustic in each doorway, each room with its particular collection of sounds from inside, its particular absence of sound, its particular draught when you pass. The room has 2 beds. The other bed has a man in it already. You can hear his breathing, slow and even, asleep or pretending to be. You have shared this room with 3 different men in 4 months, and you do not know any of their names. This is by mutual arrangement. The lodging house is not a social institution. It is a place to be horizontal and slightly warm. And the social aspects of it are handled by the minimum necessary acknowledgement of each other's presence. You sit on the edge of your bed. The springs protest. Bess jumps up beside you, which is technically not allowed, but which you allow, and which Mrs. Henshaw has never come into notice. You remove your boots. Your feet, freed from the leather, ache in the particular way of feet that have been working for 12 hours, and you work your toes, feeling the blood coming back, the slight pins and needles of circulation restored. Then the coat. Then you lie back on the mattress, which is straw and old rags under a thin ticking, and feel the weight of the day settling around you. Bess curls against your side. Her warmth is immediate and substantial, the warmth of a small animal who runs a higher temperature than you do, and you press your hand against her side and feel her breathing slow and steady, the breathing of a creature who has done what it came to do today and is now done for a time. The sounds of the lodging house settle around you. The man in the other bed shifts, a rustle of straw and ticking. Somewhere below, in the room beneath, voices, a low conversation between people you do not know about things you cannot hear. The creak of the house itself, wood settling against stone in the way old London buildings settle. The particular language of structures that have been standing for longer than any of their current inhabitants. Outside, the city continues. You cannot see the windows of the room. You know there are windows because you can feel the air from them, the slight cold of glass. And because you can hear the particular way the street sounds come through glass as opposed to wood. Glass does something to sound, makes it slightly more present, slightly more immediate, like a membrane that transmits without fully absorbing. Through that membrane, London at 6 o'clock. The omnibuses still running, their wheels and the horses' hooves and the calling of the conductors, the newspaper sellers, the late editions, the calls cutting through the traffic noise with the practised projection of men whose voices are their tools. A barrel organ somewhere down the street, playing something that might be a popular song you once knew, though you cannot place it now. The particular liquid sound of a knife grinder's wheel, a sound that always reminds you of something, but you can never quite remember what. You think about the day, 2 shillings and 4p halfpenny, minus the expenditure, call it 1 and 11 for tomorrow, which is a reasonable float, enough to begin the day from a position of not desperation rather than desperation. The difference between these two positions is small in financial terms and enormous in practical terms. Desperation makes you make mistakes. Desperation makes you rush your counting or take a shortcut on a route you should not shortcut, or approach a passer-by too directly, with too much need visible in the approach, and need visible in the approach is the fastest way to drive a potential giver past without giving. You learn this in the first year. You learned it from a man named Brickley, who had been on the streets of London for longer than you had been blind, who had a pitch near Waterloo Bridge, and who appeared to do nothing different from anyone else, and yet consistently took in more per day than anyone near him. You spent a week near his pitch, listening, trying to understand the difference. Eventually you asked him. He was silent for a long time. You had not expected an answer. These things are rarely given freely. Then he said, "They don't want to know how bad it is. They want to feel good about helping. You have thought about this many times. You have turned it over in the dark of many evenings. What it means about human nature. What it says about the nature of giving in a city where there is too much need and not enough money, and people have been asked too many times to feel guilty about the gap between what they have and what others don't. They don't want to know how bad it is. They want to feel good about helping. You work very hard on the pitch to give them that feeling. You work at being approachable rather than pitiful. You work at stillness rather than supplication. You work at Bess's particular charm, the small living warmth of a dog that people can relate to when a person's situation might be too large, too complicated, too implicated in everything they would rather not think about. You work at your voice, which is the thing you have some control over, keeping it level and real rather than performing distress, because performed distress produces a specific kind of uncomfortable guilt that resolves not in a coin, but in a quickened step away. This is your craft. This is what you do. It is not, you understand, the craft you thought your life would be about. In Birmingham, before the lime kiln, before everything, you were a foundry man, you poured iron. There is particular sensory memory of that work that you return to sometimes, involuntarily, the way you might return to a song that is embedded deep enough to come back without invitation. The heat of the pour, the colour of molten metal, which is orange and then yellow-white at its hottest. And you know this colour now only from memory, can no longer produce it by simply looking at something, can only find it in the archive of the years before. The weight of the ladle, the smell of hot iron, which is distinctive, a metallic sweetness that is nothing like blood. Though people always make that comparison, that is more like hot stone than like anything organic. The skill of it, the physical knowledge in your hands and arms and shoulders of how to move the pour, how to fill a mould evenly, how to read the way the metal flowed and stopped and cooled. You were good at it. You knew you were good at it in the way you know things that are true about your own body, not from praise or recognition, but from the direct evidence of the work itself, the way the iron behaved when you handled it, the way the finished casting came out of the mould with the precision that meant the pour had been right. That knowledge is still there. It has nowhere to go now. It sits in your hands, in the muscle memory of your arms and shoulders, completely inert. A vocabulary with nothing to say, a skill attached to a life that no longer exists. Sometimes, lifting something heavy, the particular engagement of those specific muscles, you can feel the ghost of the ladle, the ghost of the foundry, the ghost of a man who knew what he was good at and had a place in the world that corresponded to that knowledge. You do not dwell on this. Dwelling on this is a luxury you cannot afford, but it is there, in the evenings, when there is space for it. When Bess's breathing is steady beside you, and the city's sounds have settled into their evening register, and the sharp demands of the day have quieted enough for things you're not managing to push through. 8 years. In 8 years you've done the following. You have learned to read the city by ear and nose and foot. You have learned the hierarchy of the street, which is more complex than anyone who has not lived it would imagine. You've learned to negotiate without seeing the face across from you. You've learned to sleep in places that were not designed for sleeping. You've learned to maintain a standard of cleanliness, of a kind, without the infrastructure that makes cleanliness easy. You have learned when to speak and when to be still, and when the particular quality of a silence means danger, and when it means indifference. You have learned to find Bess every morning at the corner of Great Russell Street without knowing how she knows to be there. What you have not learned is how to stop being 42 years old and blind in London with 2 shillings and 4 pence halfpenny to your name, and no prospect of any of this being different. This is not self-pity. It is arithmetic. The man in the other bed turns over. The straw crackles. He mutters something without waking, a conversational remnant from whatever he is dreaming about, and then his breathing settles back into its rhythm. You close your eyes, which changes nothing about the quality of your darkness, but is a signal to your body that the day is done, an instruction. The way you once blew out a lamp to tell yourself the working was finished. Sleep now, the lamp is out. The eyes closing are your lamp. It takes a while for sleep to come. It always does. In the interim, the sounds, the barrel organ closer now, its mechanism a little loose so that certain notes have a slight tremor. A dog somewhere, not Bess, a larger dog with a bay in it. The newspaper boy, still at it, his particular cry fading and brightening as he moves his pitch. The church bells, which will mark the hours through the night, regular and indifferent and old, ringing the same notes they rang when your grandfather was alive, when his grandfather was alive, when this city was smaller and fouler and somehow less overwhelming than it is now. You think about tomorrow. Tomorrow is a Tuesday. On Tuesdays, the traffic on Ludgate Hill has a slightly different character because of the market at St. Bartholomew's to the north, which draws a different population, more working people on errands, fewer city men on their way to offices. The Tuesday pitch is usually slightly worse in the morning and better in the afternoon. You've been tracking this for 11 months. The way you track everything, the slow accumulation of pattern and exception, and the gradual refinement of a model that never quite matches reality, but improves with each new data point. Weather is the unknown variable. You cannot see weather coming. You can smell it sometimes. Rain has a smell, particularly rain coming in off the Thames, a particular wetness in the air that arrives before the rain itself, and you have learned to read this with some reliability, enough that you've usually put up your coat collar before the first drops arrive. But fog, the great Victorian fog, the coal fog that is London's particular atmospheric achievement, the fog that is both a natural phenomenon and an industrial one, the fog that is what you get when 1,000,000 chimneys burning coal interact with a river valley and a particular set of meteorological conditions. Fog arrives without warning. You cannot smell it coming. By the time it is present, it is already a problem. And this week, you have felt it coming. You cannot explain how. It is not a smell exactly. It is more a quality of the air, a thickness in it that has been building for 3 days, the way you sometimes feel a cold coming before the symptoms arrive, a kind of pre-existing condition of the atmosphere. The other people on your informal street network have mentioned it too. Old Thomas, who has a pitch near the Strand and has been doing this for 30 years, said on Sunday, "Fog's coming, not a question." You agreed with him. Fog is not for you the aesthetic experience it is for other people. You have read about fog in the years before, in descriptions that made it sound atmospheric and mysterious and vaguely romantic in the way that Victorian writers like to make unpleasant things sound. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes and all the rest of it. For you, fog is a navigation disaster. Fog removes your acoustic landmarks. Fog muffles the sounds that are your map. The church bells become indistinct, their direction uncertain, their timing swallowed. The traffic sounds come from unexpected angles, the fog bouncing them off surfaces it is not supposed to bounce them off, creating echoes that mislead. The smells change, the fog bringing with it a sulphurous, acrid quality that overrides the subtler indicators. In fog you become, briefly, more blind than you usually are. This is a specific fear, one you have not fully accommodated. But that is tomorrow's problem, possibly. And possibly the fog will not come, or will come lightly, or will come and pass by noon. The weather in London is not constant, is not predictable, is part of the daily risk assessment that everyone here runs, whether they know they are running it or not. Tomorrow, sleep takes you slowly, coming in from the edges rather than arriving all at once, the way it does when you're tired enough to need it, but alert enough to resist it. The sounds of the lodging house soften. Mrs. Henshaw's footsteps on the stairs, her rounds, the ritual checking. A door closes somewhere. The barrel organ stops. London goes on. You go under. The morning, when it comes with fog. You know before you are fully awake. The sounds of the city, which you read even in sleep, have changed. There is a muffled quality to everything, a softness in the acoustic that tells you the air outside is thick. The carriage wheels on the cobbles, which should be sharp and definite, are blurred. The voices of the early workers, which should carry with the clarity of cold, clean air, are closer and more present than their direction suggests. Fog. You sit up. The man in the other bed has already gone. The room is empty in the particular way of a room that was occupied and is no longer. The body warmth of another person recently absent. The straw of his bed still bearing the impression of his weight. Bess is at your feet, already awake, already watching the door with the attentiveness of a dog who has read the morning and found it interesting. You dress. You pay attention to everything. In fog, everything matters more. The boots carefully, the coat all buttons. You run your hands over the tray, check the matches, check the dish, check everything is where it should be before you leave the room, because in fog the return to a lodging house is not guaranteed to go smoothly, and if something is wrong with your setup you want to know now, and not when you are 2 miles from here and your fingers find an absence where something should be. Everything is where it should be. You go downstairs. Mrs. Henshaw is in the narrow hallway at the bottom, which she rarely is at this hour. The fact that she is there is information. Thick out, she says. How thick? Can't see the building across the road. This is the serious kind. This is not the light morning haze that burns off by 8. This is the October fog that settles into the river valley and the street canyons and refuses to move until it is ready, which is sometimes by noon and sometimes not until the following day. This is the kind that makes the newspapers, eventually, if it lasts long enough. Pea super, that is the term people use now. The yellow-green fog that is not quite yellow and not quite green, but is both and neither. The particular colour of coal burning in cold, wet air. People die in the bad fogs. You know this because you have known people who knew people, the chain of information that moves through the network you are part of. Old men, mostly. People with bad lungs. People who breathe too much of it over too many years. But also, people who get lost in it. People who walk into the river. You think about the river. Stick to the main street, says Mrs. Henshaw, with the authority of someone who has lived through many London fogs and survived them all. The accumulated advice of 40 years compressed into 6 words. I will, you say. Bess is at your heel as you open the door. The cold of the fog hits immediately, and it is not like the clean cold of the last few days. It is a wet cold, a cold with a chemical quality, the particular bite of sulphur dioxide, which is what you get when the coal smoke cannot rise and disperses instead at the level where people are breathing it. It coats the inside of your nose immediately, a slight burning sensation that you have learned to breathe through rather than against, the fighting of it making it worse. You step out. The sound world is different. Everything is closer and further at the same time. This is the paradox of fog acoustics. Sounds that are physically nearby feel muffled and distant, while sounds that are far away arrive with unexpected presence. The fog doing something strange to the propagation that your experience has never fully resolved. You hear footsteps that seem to be directly beside you and cannot locate their direction. You hear a cart that sounds as if it is behind you and then passes in front. You stop. You establish your orientation. Your left foot is on the doorstep of Mrs. Henshaw's, which means the door is behind you, which means the street is ahead. The street runs from here, east-west. You need to go east to reach the main road, and then north toward Ludgate Hill. This, you know. This is your map, which you carry in your body rather than in your vision, and which is therefore unaffected by the fog, at least in theory. In theory. You take 12 careful paces forward, your stick sweeping, and find the edge of the pavement. Good. You are where you expect to be. You turn right, which is east, and begin. The fog plays tricks on sound, but it does not move the walls and the curbs and the gradients of the streets, which are your primary navigation instruments. You feel the curb slope of the corner. You feel the change in cobble texture that marks the crossing. You follow the wall on your left, your stick finding it with each sweep, the reassurance of a solid surface. Bess is very close at your heel. She does not range. As she sometimes does in good conditions, she stays tight. You're making good progress when you hear it. A woman crying. Not crying in the way of someone having a bad moment, not the tears of a minor distress, but the sustained, ragged crying of someone in real trouble, the sound of a person who has been frightened long enough that they are past the stage of managing their reaction and have arrived at the stage of the noise coming out regardless. You stop. The crying is to your right, perhaps 10 yards. You cannot see into the fog, but you can hear it clearly now that you're still a young woman's voice, broken up by attempts to catch breath. The words emerging fragmented. Lost, please. Someone I don't know. The street is not empty. You can hear other footsteps passing, the sound of people in the fog navigating their own problems, the particular forward-focused sound of people who are dealing with the fog's challenges and do not have attention for anything additional. Nobody is stopping. You consider your own calculation. The route to the pitch, the time, the morning's opportunity narrowing with every minute of fog, your map, which is already stressed, which will not get less stressed by adding an additional variable. You step toward the sound. Bess moves with you immediately, without hesitation, in the direction of the crying. The woman is where the sound said she would be. Your stick finds the wall she's standing against, and then her skirts, and then her arm when you reach for it, and she flinches away with a small sound of alarm. "It's all right," you say. "I'm not going to hurt you." The crying stops, or rather, it holds itself for a moment. "Who are you?" "My name is William," you say. "I'm a street vendor. I know this area. Can I help?" A pause. She's breathing hard. You can hear the irregularity of it, the aftermath of fear. She smells of good soap, which is information, and of a perfume you cannot name, and of wool. Her boots, when she shifts her weight, have the sound of proper boots, not cheap ones. "I can't see anything," she says. "I was walking to the station and I got turned around and now I don't know where I am." "What station?" "Blackfriars." "I know Blackfriars," you say. "I can take you there." Another pause. She's doing what anyone would do, evaluating the offer, the instincts of a woman alone in a fog-blind street toward a stranger offering to take her somewhere. You understand the evaluation. You wait for it. "Are you—" she begins, and then stops. "Blind," you say. "Yes, since you were wondering. It doesn't make me a worse guide in this fog. I know these streets without the sight, and you have none at the moment." A beat. "That's a strange logic," she says, and there is something in her voice that is not quite amusement, but is not pure fear either. "It's a strange morning," you say. She takes your arm. Her grip is tight, the grip of someone who is genuinely frightened and taking what is available. You feel Bess's warm flank against your right leg, and the warmth of this woman's gloved hand through your coat sleeve on your left, and you set off, your stick sweeping ahead, the three of you moving through the fog that you cannot see and she cannot see, and that is, between you, navigable. You take her through the route you know. Not the most direct route, but the safest, the one with the most walls on the left and the clearest acoustic markers. At each landmark you say it aloud. "This is the church on the corner. We turn left here. This is the start of the new street. Wider. Feel the space open. This is the hill beginning. Slight gradient. Down." She does not speak much. She's concentrating, perhaps, or taking in the experience of being led through a city she cannot see by someone who leads it this way every day. At the approach to Blackfriars, where the sounds of the station are audible even through the fog, the particular mechanical sound of the trains and the louder human sounds of a station, she stops. "I can find it from here," she says. "You can," you agree. She releases your arm. A pause. Her breathing has steadied. The fear has mostly left it. "Thank you," she says. Genuinely. A pause. "I'm sorry I hesitated." "Most people would hesitate more," you say. "What's the dog's name?" "Bess." You hear her crouch, as the woman this morning the pitch crouched, and the sound of Bess's tail against the pavement. "Good Bess," she says softly. When she stands, there is the particular sound of a handbag clasp opening. Then her hand finds yours, and she presses coins into your palm and closes your fingers over them, the way you would close a child's hand over something you wanted them to keep. Her footsteps move away. The station absorbs her. The fog closes behind her. You open your hand and count what is there by feel. A half-crown. 2 shillings, a 6pence. 2 shillings and 6pence. More than today's pitch will likely produce in total, more than the last 2 days on the pitch. You stand in the fog for a moment with Bess pressing against your leg and 2 shillings and 6pence in your hand, and the fog thick around you, the city muffled and strange and present. What the woman got from the transaction? A guide through the fog, safe passage, the resolution of a fear that was real and specific. A story she will probably tell later about the blind beggar who navigated her to the station in the pea super. A useful piece of evidence, perhaps, about people who seem helpless and are not. What you got? The money, obviously. The money is real and important, and you will not pretend otherwise. But also, in the minutes of the guiding, something else. The return of a capability. The use of what you know in a way that was needed by someone who did not have it. The function of something you have built over 8 years of navigating this city without sight. Built not from choice, but from necessity. Built the way water carves a channel, by the repeated fact of having to, and which you sometimes forget is actually a kind of knowledge, a real competence, a map that exists in your body and that served this morning, a purpose that a sighted person could not easily have served. The fog does not recognize this. The fog continues, indifferent, wrapping everything in its particular October chemistry, the smell of it in your lungs, the cold of it in your face. You turn back toward the pitch. Your stick finds the curb. Bess moves at your heel. The city goes on, as it always does, around you and through you, and without particularly noticing you. But you are in it. That is what you know this morning, in the fog, with the weight of coins in your hand, and the cold in your face, and the sounds of London coming at you from strange angles, muffled and rerouted and strange. You are in it. And this is not nothing. This is, in fact, everything you have. The pitch that day is thin, as you expected. The fog keeps the city men from their usual route, or keeps them faster, more purposeful, less likely to slow for anything, even the silent man with the tray and the dog on the wall. By noon you have 6pence from the pitch itself. With the 2 and 6 from the morning, the day is already good before it has properly happened. But the afternoon is where everything becomes complicated. You hear him before you see him, which is to say, you hear him the way you hear everything, through the particular organization of footsteps and breathing and intention that your body has learned to read. He is not a city man. His boots have a heavier sound than that, not the iron-shod clumping of a workman, but not the leather of an office worker either. Something between. And his pace is wrong. It is not the stride of someone going somewhere. It is the pace of someone looking. The shorter footfall, the more frequent stopping, the sound of a person surveying a scene rather than crossing it. A man, then, looking at beggars. This happens. It happens more than you might expect given the position beggars occupy in the official taxonomy of London's problems. Present, undesirable, periodically addressed, fundamentally persistent. The people who look at beggars professionally are various. The police, obviously. The officers of the Mendicity Society, who are employed by a private charitable organisation to investigate cases of street begging and report on whether they represent genuine need or organised fraud. The reformers, of whom there are always some, who come to see the conditions they have read about, who come with notebooks and moral indignation and the particular energy of people who have decided that something must be done. And occasionally journalists, though in your experience journalists do not usually come to Ludgate Hill. This footfall says, official something. You prepare yourself. There is a preparation that happens internally, a composure, a putting away of anything that might read as guilt or evasion, a settling into the facts of your situation, which are: you are on a public street, you are selling matches, you are licensed to do so. You have a letter in your inside pocket from the rector of St. Giles, stating that you are a known and genuine case of blindness resulting from an industrial accident, and that he has satisfied himself as to your character and need. This letter cost you the social equivalent of a debt that you've been paying down in small courtesies for 18 months, but it is worth the cost, because the letter turns the calculation when a mendicity society man is standing in front of you, from a vulnerable one to a stable one. His footsteps stop in front of you. Name? William Marsh, you say. How long on this pitch? 11 months, roughly. Selling? Matches. Lucifer matches. Halfpenny a bundle. You lift the tray slightly. The professional gesture, the offer. A pause. The sound of something being written. A scratching that might be pencil on paper. And the dog? Bess. She's mine. You have documentation? I do, you say, and reach into your inside pocket and produce the letter, which you hold out in the direction of his voice. Your hand is steady. You have practiced this steadiness, the way a witness on a stand practices the quality of their testimony, not because you are lying, but because the appearance of steadiness is itself a form of evidence in a world that is quick to interpret your condition as either fraudulent or pitiable, and you are neither. He takes the letter, a silence while he reads it, or you assume he reads it. You cannot see him reading. You wait. The rector of St. Giles. Yes. You attend. When I'm able, you say. This is not quite a lie. You've attended St. Giles 3 times in the last year, which qualifies as winnable by a generous interpretation. Another silence. The fog moves around you both. Bess has not moved. He hands the letter back. You're on the register, he says, which is information you already knew, but which coming from him means something specific. The Mendicity Society keeps a register of known cases. Being on the register means you've been assessed and found genuine, which means you are not a priority for their intervention, which means they will not be pursuing prosecution. It is the street equivalent of a clean bill of health. I know, you say. There have been complaints, he says. This is new. Not about you specifically. About the density of cases on this stretch. I'm the only regular on this stretch, you say. There's a woman near the corner who works the evening, and on Thursdays there's sometimes a man with a notice board. The woman's name is Margaret Sayers, you say. She lost her husband to the cholera in 71. The man with the notice board is deaf, not blind. He's been on the street for 15 years. A pause. This information has stopped him slightly. He was expecting defensiveness or ignorance, not a thorough knowledge of the street's social landscape. You know them, he says. This is my street, you say. I know who's on it. Another pause, shorter this time. Right, he says, and his tone has shifted. Not to warmth exactly, but to something less official. The complaints are about a general increase in cases across the area, more pressure from the residential associations. You understand. I understand, you say. We'll be doing a full survey of the Ludgate area in the next month. I'll be here, you say. His footsteps move on. You listen to them until they are absorbed by the fog, the pattern of them becoming indistinct and then gone. Bess shifts between your feet. Her tail moves once, twice, in what might be satisfaction, or might be simply her own internal resolution of the morning's events. Yes, you say quietly to her. That's done. The afternoon passes in the way that foggy afternoons pass on a pitch like this, thinly. A few coins, one bundle of matches. The fog lifts slightly around 3 and the traffic picks up, but is still not what it is on clear days. By 5 you have 1 shilling and 3pence from the pitch, which added to the morning's 2 and 6 makes 3 shillings and 9pence for the day, minus expenses, minus the matches resupply you will need tomorrow, arriving at something close to 2 and 8 clear, 2 shillings and 8pence. You think about what this means. It means Mrs. Henshaw's lodging house tonight, definitely no workhouse. It means bread and something with it, not just bread. It means the match supply refilled without stress. It means a margin, small but real, a margin between today and tomorrow that makes tomorrow's beginning slightly less like an emergency. In the economy you live in, 2 shillings and 8pence is the difference between a good position and a difficult one. It is not wealth. It is not even comfort by any standard that the city men on this street would recognise as comfort. It is simply the slight forward lean of someone who has more behind them than they had yesterday, which is all this life asks of a day. You pack up the tray, you stand. Bess is already on her feet. The fog is beginning to thin at the edges, the particular thinning of early evening fog that means the temperature is dropping, which is not better for being warm in, but which clarifies the air slightly, which makes the church bell sharper, which makes the navigation easier. You walk toward Mrs. Henshaw's. On the way you stop at the pie cart that is sometimes on the corner of New Bridge Street and tonight is there. You can smell it from 20 yards. The hot meat smell of pies in the cart, the slight char smell of the oven, the steam rising from the display that you cannot see, but that Bess's nose registers in a very evident tightening of her pace. You buy a pie for a penny halfpenny. The pie man knows you, which means the exchange is fast and without incident. The coin counted and confirmed and the pie in your hand in 20 seconds. The pie is hot enough to be uncomfortable to hold through the paper wrapping, which is one of the few sensory experiences you genuinely look forward to in a day, the heat of it. In October, in London, with the fog just cleared and the cold settling in hard, the warmth of a freshly baked pie in your hands is something that goes directly to some part of you that exists below the level of thought and simply receives it. You eat it walking. This is the correct way to eat a street pie in your circumstances. You cannot afford to be stationary while eating, because stationary while eating reads, to the street's other inhabitants, as a person who has something worth taking. You walk and eat, and Bess receives her portion in pieces, the crust you cannot get at efficiently with your teeth, the bits of filling that escape the pastry. The evening air taste of coal and river, and the particular autumn smell of London. Dead leaves somewhere, though you cannot imagine where dead leaves would be accumulating on this stretch. Perhaps in the churchyard to the west, where the trees that you know are there from their sound, the way the wind comes differently through this section in summer when the trees are in leaf, shed their evidence into the gutters. You think about the woman in the fog, the grip of her hand on your arm, the sound of her footsteps settling as the fear left them, the coins she pressed into your palm, 2 shillings and 6pence, not for standing still and being pitied, for knowing something, for being of use. This is the thought you will carry tonight. This is what you will give to yourself in the hour before sleep, in the dark of the lodging-house room, with Bess at your feet and the sounds of London settling into their evening register. The thought that there are things you know that other people do not know. that the years of paying attention, the years of building the map, the years of learning the street by ear and nose and foot have produced something real, something useful, something that a person in difficulty in a city they cannot navigate can use. It is not the knowledge you thought your life would be about. It is not the foundryman's knowledge of iron and heat and the precision of a pour. It is not the knowledge you would have chosen to build, but it is yours. It is built from the only materials available, which is what all knowledge in the end is built from. What you have, what you can reach, what the circumstances of your life have made it necessary and possible to know. The door of Mrs. Henshaw's lodging house is ahead. Your stick finds the step. Bess bumps against your hand once. You go in. The warmth of the house hits you first. Mrs. Henshaw keeps a fire, a small one, the cheapest coal, but something, in the common room on the ground floor, and the warmth of it in the hallway when you enter is different from the quality of warmth you have been in all day, which is to say, it is not moving. It is not the variable warmth of a fire shared between 30 people in a ward, but the warmth of a house contained, slight, precarious, but present. You think, this is enough for tonight, this warmth, this floor under my feet that I know, the pie already eaten, the coins in the pouch against my chest, their weight slightly greater than yesterday. Bess, the sounds of the house settling into evening, tomorrow already started, in the sense that the day's margin exists, the 2 and 8 that means tomorrow begins from ahead rather than behind. Mrs. Henshaw, somewhere in the house, moving about in her practised way. The footsteps of a woman who has walked these floorboards so many times that she and they have arrived at an understanding. She does not appear. You do not need her to appear. The house is itself enough tonight. You go up the stairs, one hand on the loose banister, your feet knowing the height of each step, your room, the door, the particular creak of its hinge in the middle of the swing. The other man is not here yet. The room is empty and yours for now. You sit on the edge of the bed. The springs, the familiar complaint of it. Bess is up beside you immediately, her usual position, her warmth against your thigh. You reach into the pouch and count the day's coins one more time, not because you need to recount them, but because the counting is its own kind of ceremony, a taking stock, a ritual that marks the end of the working day, the transition from the alert, outward-facing state of the pitch and the streets to the turned inward state of rest. The coins are still what they were. The arithmetic holds. You put them away. Outside, London continues. In the distance, the bells of St. Paul's marking the hour. 6 strokes. Clear tonight, the fog having thinned enough to let the sound through with something like its real quality. The resonance of the great bells that you've heard from different distances and in different weather for nearly a year, and which have become in that time your most reliable clock. 6 o'clock. The city offices long closed. The evening already finding its different rhythms. The taverns beginning their proper business. The theatres warming their houses. The supper rooms. The coffee stalls coming out on the corners. The whole nocturnal life of London's middle hours. The part that comes between the day's commerce and the night's darkest work. The part that is neither decent nor criminal, but simply the evening, the ordinary evening of a city that contains both, and cannot always tell them apart. You are in it, and not in it. You're on the edge of it the way you are on the edge of most things, participant and observer, and neither, in the categories that the city recognizes, quite fitting into the space marked out for you. This is not new. You have been on the edge of things since Birmingham, since the accident, since the slow understanding, worked out over months in a hospital bed, that the world you were going back to was not the world you had left. You have stopped expecting to fit. Fitting was what the foundry man did. With his job and his weekly wage and his understanding of where he stood in the order of things, the man you're now fits differently or doesn't fit in the same way or has stopped measuring himself against the shape of the fitting. This is what 8 years does if you let it. Bess curls fully against your leg, a small dense warmth, and makes the sound she makes when she is completely settled. Not quite a sigh, something between a sigh and a quieting. The sound of a creature that has finished its assessment of the available situation and found it acceptable. You put your hand on her. Her breathing is slow and steady. The sounds of Mrs. Henshaw's house, the sounds of the street below, the sounds of London moving toward its evening. They settle around you like a thing you know, like a place, like home, in the sense that any place becomes home when you have learned it well enough, when it has been yours long enough, when you have been afraid in it and survived it and found the small daily good within it, the pie cart and the church bells and the woman who laughed and the coins pressed into your palm in the fog. Tomorrow the pitch, tomorrow the match resupply, probably, if the supply is running low. Tomorrow Bess at the corner of Great Russell Street in the cold morning, her nose bumping your hand, her tail against your leg. Tonight, this. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough, as safe as this life gets. You have 2 shillings and 8 pence. You have a route you know and a map that lives in your body. You have Bess. That is more than some people have. You know this because you have met the people who have less. The man at the workhouse who coughed all night. The woman sitting on the steps of the gin cellar who did not move. Old Thomas, who's been on the streets of London for 30 years, and whose joints are a kind of record of the winters he has lived through, the cold written into the cartilage of his knees. There are degrees of this life. There are people further from the centre than you are. This thought is not comfort exactly. Comfort is not quite what it is. It is more like context. The placing of your own situation within the larger situation, which is London, which is 800,000 people in various stages of the same struggle, more or less. The struggle to be warm and fed and not sleeping in a doorway. The struggle that is the daily fact of being poor in the richest city in the world. You are in it. You are managing it. The margin exists. Tomorrow it starts again. The candle on the small shelf, which you lit from the box of matches you keep for your own use, gutters slightly in a draught from the imperfectly fitting window. You can hear the slight change in its sound, the crackle of the flame moving. You cannot see it. You know it is there the same way you know everything, by the evidence. The warmth of it, faint but present, on the side of your face. The smell of tallow, the sound of burning. You have a candle. This is, in the reckoning of this life, a small luxury. Most people in this lodging house do not light candles. They have nothing to need light for. You light one anyway, some evenings, for the warmth and the smell and the small domesticity of it, for the feeling that the dark is chosen rather than imposed. This is one of the things you give yourself. A small thing, a candle that you cannot see, and a dog you cannot see, and a city that you see entirely differently from every other person in it. All of it yours, all of it enough. The candle burns, Bess breathes. The bells of St. Paul's mark the half-hour. London wraps around you, the noise and the cold and the complexity of it. the thousands of lives moving through its streets at this moment, each one its own map, its own small economy of survival and hope, and the management of difficulty. You are one of them. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is the same darkness it always is, complete and absolute, and by now entirely familiar. You have made a life inside it. You have built a map inside it. You have learned to navigate the largest city in the world inside it, step by careful step, one counted pace at a time. You have held a woman's arm in a fog that blinded her as thoroughly as you are always blinded, and guided her through it by the knowledge you have spent 8 years assembling in your hands and your feet and your ears. You have survived today. You will survive tomorrow. And somewhere in the city right now, a woman you will never see again is telling someone about the blind man in the fog who knew every turn. That is your mark on this city tonight. Invisible, unregistered, not in any ledger, but real. You take it with you into sleep. The candle burns down. Bess does not move. The bells mark another hour and another, and the city goes on in its enormous, indifferent, magnificent way, containing you and the millions like you and unlike you, all of you held in its noise and its smoke and its cold and its occasional, extraordinary grace. Sleep comes, London remains, and somewhere in the year 1878, in the lodging house on the court off Blackfriars Road, in a room that cost 4d a night, in the thin warmth of a candle burning itself out, you rest. You rest. Tomorrow, the church bells will pull you out of this the same way they always do. The cold will be there. The stick will be in your hand. Bess will be at the corner of Great Russell Street, her nose bumping your palm. The pitch will be cold, and the city men will come and go, and some of them will stop and some of them will not. You will count the coins by touch. You will read the morning by sound and smell, and the particular way the air moves before someone decides to stop. You will carry your map through this city that you know better than you can see. You will be in it. And that, after everything, in spite of everything, and because of everything this life has required of you, that is still something. That is still, in the cold and the smoke and the dark of a London October, the thing you hold on to. Here, warm enough, safe enough, good night.